Hey guys, we're back on a track to the schedule of the CDS. Sorry for the past two late uploads with the holidays and some other things. I was a little bit behind. So this is week 7 of CDS. Today, or at least the games today, are against Los Chalangas by Slags. And I think this week was a little bit simpler than the other weeks, just given the fact that I think Slay himself has a relatively limited combination of decks that I think are perceived as decent, that he's sort of willingly been playing. And this is more reflecting his past deck history in the draft series rather than just his champion pool. But if you just take a quick look, you notice that he definitely had the intentions of some pretty specific pairings when he made his draft, right? We see the Kayn Aatrox, and we see the Shyvana Azul. Some other things we see, like Riven, Quinn, Pike, Nora, Seraphine, even Viego to some extent, are definitely some of these more standoffish champions where there's no immediate pairings to them, and he himself hasn't really shown too much flexibility, so to speak, with his champions. And so it's very likely that, you know, if he brings like something like Aatrox, for example, he's pairing it with Kayn. And if he brings something like Azul, it's very closely going to be tied with Shyvana. And it's like, do you go like Azul Bandle City and try to play some like Targon control? You could. That's actually not the worst. We've seen like Shellfolk Targon decks in the past. But he himself just hasn't shown a really big willingness to kind of play things like that. And if you go back to player info, we see the kind of decks that he's been playing. You see Kayntrox, Nora Seraphine, Nora Seraphine, Nora Seraphine, Cosmic Hall Dragons, Kayntrox, Dragons, Dragons, Kayntrox, Dragons, Kayntrox, right? Nora Seraphine. He's been playing, he's probably played like 6 different decks up to this point. And so it's definitely a lot easier to sort of prepare for this week, because I know that his pool is relatively limited in what he's willing to play. And if you guys are keeping up to date with my lineup and what I think that I'm quite good into, it's definitely these unit-based mid-range decks. And specifically the Dragons or the Kayntrox, right? And if he brings both of them, or at least one of them, going into me, then I feel pretty confident in being able to beat him, right? And so in preparation for the expectation of either some sort of mid-range deck like Kayntrox or Dragons, I decided to bring these 3 decks. Now this one I was cooking. I had no chance to play Karma, or at least I didn't think any Karma deck was actually good coming up to these weeks. But specifically into a sort of double mid-range lineup, I think that this deck had an opportunity to shine. And this is where things get interesting, right? Because up to this point, the reason why I haven't really been very high on Karma is the fact that I always felt like the deck lacked a finite win condition. In the past, I'll play Karma with a Victor in PWC, in PNZ, and that was a solid win condition, or at least I knew how to win with that deck. Now I don't have Victor, I don't have Set, which are what I think are the two most like win conny champions paired with Karma. And so I was a little bit stuck with how I can build her, and I came across this sort of combination of Ionia with Freljord. And this was a deck that I have played in the past. I played Karma, Set, Freljord, but because I don't have Set, now I need to go back and actually construct a win condition. And luckily we got Bodir of Blackened Ice, one of the newest Freljord cards, the 8-drop that summons 2 Frozen Thralls with countdown 2. And I found that this card just applied a lot of pressure, knowing that my opponent, you know, if you're playing Cane Trucks, well, you can't play any Explorers because those aren't in your regions, right? And in Dragons, if you're playing the Explorer, the 2/3 Challenger, that's just an off-tempo sort of unit. And so I don't know if I was expecting him to play it, or even if he does play it, it's not going to be very good. You're probably not running 3 copies of it. Something like this can really, really sneak by. Now, the rest of the deck was kind of interesting. I do want to talk a little bit more about this deck because I spent a lot of time sort of playing around with it. Now, spoiler, I didn't actually get to play it, so I'm actually just going to front load a lot of jibber jabber right now. And the whole idea of this was just focusing on having a solid win condition. And this is a this is a pretty, you know, standard ramp deck. I have 3 copies of Winters, such 3 copies of Wild Mysticism. And now the rest of it is really figuring out how I can make the deck work, right? Because even if I'm playing Karma, a lot of the tools or a lot of the spells that you're playing in this deck don't actually help you win the game, right? A lot of it is stall tools or ramp that helps you get to the Karma point, but not a lot to actually help you win the game. Obviously, something like Bodir is sort of there to apply the pressure that something like Set normally would, but that itself isn't enough, right? So I start to construct a deck around very solid 5 cost units, and that can help me apply a lot of pressure, sort of gum up the mid game, and things like that. The reason why 5 cost is so important is because if you ramp on turn 3, you're going to have 5 mana on turn 4. And so being able to play a 5 drop on turn 4 is very, very important. That's where things like Udyr come in, or Scattered Pod come in. These are super solid 5 drops that help me progress towards my end game. Udyr himself actually provides a little bit of a win condition, because if you play a stance swap with Karma on board, you get 2 stance swaps, which can turbo your Udyr level up or give him extra stats. Also getting extra stats from the stance swap. Or if, you know, Udyr is just a 5/6 with the region because you played a 0 mana stance swap on him, you know, that's actually very, very strong. And he's able to generate you more value throughout the game. Scatterpod is also super important because not only does it become an elusive unit once you have 10 mana and can just beat down your opponent, but getting that important draw is so important as well because of how I construct my deck. At burst speed, I either get a freeze, which is flash freeze, or I get placer bets, which is draw, or I get winter's touch, which is ramp. If I go slow, I have the chance of getting Wild Mysticism, which is more ramp. I have Bury Nice, Big Win Con, or Frozen in Fear, which is actually put in the deck as sort of a pseudo Concussive Palm. Notice that I don't actually have Concussive Palm in my deck. And the reason for this is because I think this is a much better card paired with Karma. If you get a double cast off of Frozen in Fear, you get 2 Rhyme Thing packs, which are Overwhelm units, and it stacks itself, right? Combined with the ability to double freeze with Karma, you can really, really ramp up the attack of the Rhyme Thing packs, which I thought was super cute. But the ability to either fish for more ramp, if you want, with Scatterpod, or just getting a freeze or a spell to stall the game. And fast speed, I only have Tag Out and Deny, so very, very selective pool of cards that I can receive, right? But yeah, was a really, really cool deck. I was really looking to play it because I think it would have absolutely crushed, but he banned it, which was... I spent too long on this deck. Sorry, I need to keep going. The next deck I brought was Ash Galio. So I did make a trade in the past week. I traded Lee Sin for Ash, and the reason being for that is I wanted Ash to sort of have that third sort of good deck in some of my lineups that I was planning. But because it's also giving me a second Freljord champion, I could also play the Karma Freljord with the Galio Freljord. And initially I had Ash in the Karma deck because I thought Udyr paired better with the Galio because the Formidables, the region, blah blah blah. But I just found out that Ash was so awkward in this deck because she just didn't really do what I needed to do, right? She was good at attacking but not blocking. And so Udyr I ended up putting Udyr in this deck and Ash in this deck because this deck, you know, Ash, Udyr, really not a huge difference. But some sort of small changes and adjustments to an expectation of mid-range decks. I have 3 copies of Captain Erika. up from 2. I have what did I do? What did I replace this for? I had like the explorers or like the it was a little bit of a flex spot between like the explorer or the mage seek junior. I added 2 copies of troll chant just to have extra interaction against mid-range decks and mid-range units. And then for my third deck, of course, you know it. I have Yasuo Katarina. Not too much stuff going on here. Something interesting to note is just Memory Cloak. The reason why I put Memory Cloak in the deck over I replace a Deny and a Notify for 2 copies of Memory Cloak is because of just its efficiency into what I'm expecting, right? The only sort of spells I'm expecting from my opponents are going to be strike spells, things like the Furious Wielder from the Canetrox, Single Combat Strafing Strike, things like that. And of course, things like Notify could work on some of those strike spells, Single Combat Strafing Strike. But they wouldn't work specifically on Furious Wielder, right? Which was something I was expecting. I was expecting Canetrox. And specifically in the Canetrox, there are no spells that you can Notify. So Notify would be a completely dead card in that matchup. And I didn't want that, right? Obviously, Notify would work well against dragons. But Deny and Memory Cloak would also work against dragons, albeit just slightly more expensive. So because of the fact that I was expecting Canetrox in the lineup, I decided to cut the Notifies, which would be dead if you decided to be both Canetrox and Dragon, and play Memory Cloak instead. Otherwise, I have 2 copies of Thorn of the Rose. Just I say it every time I play against some mid-range guy. Fantastic card against mid-range. A 5/1, they can't ping it, and it trades for their 4-drop, 5-drop, and gives me a Guile. Just a Scatter Pot, another beefy boy, and I have 2 Armed Acquisition, which, to be honest, are only really there for the weapon destruction against Canetrox. But still better than a House Spider in these sort of situations. But that's my lineup, and he ended up bringing. Well, he didn't bring both. He ended up bringing Nora Viego, a pretty classic sort of Vandal City Shadow Isles deck with like the Aloof Travelers and the classic removal suite. His next deck, he brought a Seraphine deck, so Seraphine Riven. His ability to play like the Seraphine Noxus. Fairly standard sort of situation with Sunken Temple and Back Alley Bar. Although there isn't like the it's not like the Plaza Guardian version. It's just like the Pursuit Perfection version. And for his third deck, he does bring dragons. So he doesn't bring both dragons and Canetrox, which is probably smarter. He brings Nora Viego over the Canetrox, and he also doesn't bring Seraphine Nora, right? So he pairs Riven with the Seraphine for the Noxus, and then he brings Nora Viego, which is fine. I end up banning the Seraphine deck, which is probably the most annoying and the one that I'm least prepared for, because a lot of my stuff I'm preparing for mid-range, right? I have the Thorn of the Rose. I don't want to play Thorn of the Rose into Seraphine Ribbon, right? Or, Blade's Edge, Death Ray, Mystic Shot, whatever, Divine Draft can just deal with it, right? Super annoying deck, don't want to deal with it, so easy ban. And then I'm left with these 2 decks. You notice that, pretty expected. He does play 2 copies of Scholarly Pioneer. He has 2 singles and 2 strafings, and so I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared for the strikes. I have the mid-range units to gun with the board, and I'm ready to go. So pretty expected overall for this week. I'll leave you guys with the games, and I'll catch you guys with the next one for CDS. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you with the next one. Peace out, guys. Take care. Alrighty, so I'm coming in with a little bit of post commentary. I wasn't able to record with my voice this week, so I'll just be voicing over the games as I go. So again, as I mentioned in the previous section about draft strategies as well as bans, I decided to ban the Seraphine deck. Unfortunately, he bans the Karma deck, which I think was his best option. I think it was pretty good into all of his decks. And I queue up the Yasuo Katarina, and he queues up the dragons, the Shyvana Azul. So in this matchup, he has odd attack tokens, which is great. I don't think I need to explain again why that's great, because he plays Yun on 5, I play Hillock on 5. The rest of the hand is kind of curious. I don't want to keep too many Hillocks, although I think hilariously I draw more Hillocks. And the only cards I'm looking for here are, well, the reason are like Fey Blade Twirler, Vestine Disciple. This hand's actually really interesting because I draw 3 Vestine Disciple. And now obviously that doesn't do much in applying pressure. It's not like Katarina getting that level. It's not like having a Fey Blade Twirler here to get buffed. But very importantly, why Vestine Disciple is so good is that it helps level up Yasuo, right? Now all of a sudden I'm 3 out of 5 on my Yasuo progress, and that means, you know, I play Hillock, that's 4, Hillock stunned on next turn, that's 5, and now Yasuo's leveled against a mid-range deck. Like, that's just lights out, right? And so I'm actually pretty happy with this. He has a, I wouldn't call it a super slow hand per se, but a pretty standard hand from his part. He plays the Ruined Dragon Guard. I play Yasuo. I could play like 2 of the Vestine Disciples, level my Yasuo, but then I won't have Yasuo on board right when I play Hillock. And having leveled Yasuo before having Hillock down really just doesn't really do much, even especially in my hand. I end up drawing 3 Hillocks, which is hilarious. And the reason why I didn't play Vestine Disciple last turn is because I wanted to bank mana, right? And the reason why that's so important is so I can play something like Twin Discipline with Hillock. And in this turn, it might even be important to play Twin Discipline with something like these, the Unworthy Soul, right? So if I had played one of the Shimon Winds last turn, I'd only have 6 mana this turn, which means I wouldn't be able to twin Hillock, I wouldn't be able to twin Unworthy Soul, right? So super important to prioritize keeping my Yasuo alive. Although I could draw, you know, my other 2 copies of Yasuo with the Hillock, it just wouldn't be worth it overall. So sort of a heads up nod to that. Keep my Yasuo alive. And the reason why this is also really good is even though the Shyvana doesn't die, the Shyvana's left at 1 health. But if this does resolve, I can slam Hillock, kill Shyvana at burst speed. He plays a Blessing of Tarragon, and I get a really nice Unworthy Soul value, right? So really sort of nice outcome out of this. Again, Shyvana doesn't die, but now I'm ahead on board, right? I have a Yasuo on board. And he always needs to develop into his tax, right? And now this is the cool part. I have 7 mana. My Yasuo's at 4 out of 5. This Vestine Disciple will level my Yasuo, which is really nice. Now I could have played the Fey Blade Twirler and get that 33 buff on it and start going, but I want to leave up that 5 mana for the Hillock, right? Now, I always preach that, oh, you should play Hillock on your opponent's attack turn. But not only because I have 3 copies of Hillock, my Yasuo's leveled. So this is a burst speed kill on the Shyvana. Pew! How satisfying is that? So again, if your Yasuo is not leveled, you want to play Hillock on your opponent's attack turn. So you get 2 stuns in 2 rounds in order to triple over your Yasuo, right? But once your Yasuo is leveled, well, then you can sort of go off. And now I do want to get my Fey Blade Twirls going. I have a Hillock on board. I'm able to sort of get that Valley going, get that attack going. And what I want to do is I just want to start diversifying my threats, right? I want to start having more than just this Yasuo Tsuyin for 5, because that's not really applying a lot of pressure. He unfortunately does have one of his Explorers. He's on 2 copies of the Explorer cards, but luckily I draw 30 Hillock, which again is hilarious. So I play Hillock here. I want to play Hillock because I want the second stun out of it, right? And right now it's pretty nice because now he's down to 2 mana. If you can't kill the Fey Blade Twirler now, I sort of run away with the game. So the only thing that sort of worries me is if he has exactly single combat, because I'm tapped out of mana, right? I can no longer do anything to protect my stuff, but at the very least my Yasuo is alive. Now I guess he could have killed my Yasuo if he had single combat. He could just drag with the challenger unit and then singled off of the dragon, but then he loses both his units to my Yasuo, and then I have 2 more Yasuo's hand, right? So that's totally fine. Now unfortunately he does have the sharp sight, which kills my Fey Blade Twirler, but fortunately for me I draw another copy of it. So I'm just really trying to set up a board space where I can get a lot of value out of it. But at the same time, I know that this attack isn't applying a lot of pressure, right? If he blocks, I deal 1 damage, right? I have Hillock. So if he's forced to develop into my turn or in his turn, I always have punishes for that, right? Like Screech Strike. He's forced to develop these cards. If you want to develop it, he shouldn't have burned the mana last turn. And because my also is leveled, pew, like it dies. And then I have 2 copies of Steel Tempest in my hand. I have a Concussive Palm. Any unit he develops isn't gonna do anything. And that's the power of Yasuo decks into these sort of mid-range decks. It's just it's quite unplayable actually once if you get to this point. It really is quite unplayable, and you just notice how those 3 Vastine Disciples in my opening hand just really helped me turbo myself into this position, right? And now every time he plays a unit, it's gone off the board. Nothing can do about it, and I'm free to always develop into my turn because I know that my stuns are going to be more efficient than any sort of unit he can play, right? Acello comes down, I quickly stun it, and I just prepare myself for an open attack lethal to finish. So textbook, absolutely textbook Yasuo gameplay. Send the tag out, and then obviously I have 4 mana left over for deny in case he has a strike spell, right, which guarantees me lethal this round. The only way he could like prevent lethal is if he decides to hush the Fate Blade Toiler again, but that's just sort of stalling the inevitable. Single combat, met with a deny, and obviously at 1 mana he has nothing to do, and I have a lethal swing with my board. When it surrenders.
One step closer to redemption.
All right, let's jump forward to the second game. There you go. Now the second game, I queue up my Ashe Galio. Ashe being the replacement of Udyr because I just paired Udyr with my Karma, and he decides to queue up the dragons again. This one's kind of interesting, right? You look at my hand, it's like, oh, Petrified Hound, that's that's your 1-drop, right? You want to play that on turn 1? No. Against this mid-range deck, I value, there's a lot more cards that I value, right? The only hand where you'd ever keep a 1-drop is against aggro, I guess, because there's just so many more important cards in your deck, right? I can't stress this enough, and it's the reason why I keep Galio. Because I know I'm gonna make it to that turn 7 when I can slam Galio, and I just want to make sure that I have a very strong board that I can sort of pair with it. I'm looking for my 3-drops, my 4-drops. I'm looking for my Balin, the kind of cards that will get me ahead in a mid-range matchup, not sort of just setting up board. Unfortunately, I draw 3 Galios, which doesn't really help my argument here. But at least Ashe being a 4-drop is actually really nice to kind of stem this mid game up. Now he does have Dragon Charm. I'm super scared actually of like Wounded White Flame plus Shyvana. We're both sort of scaling decks in the sense where we sort of stack stats on board. And if he actually has like if he gets like a 5/7 Shyvana on turn 4, I think that's sort of like really close to lights out because I just can't deal with it. But very luckily he does not have that hand. Now my hand does look awkward, right? I have 3 Gallios and 2 Ashes, but very fortunate for me, the second Ashe is actually a really big blessing, right? In the sort of mid-range matchup where I've teched in 2 more Troll Chants, it's really helpful to have an additional Flash Freeze access to it because it just shuts down any sort of strike spell, right? It shuts down a trade, and it's something that he probably doesn't expect because it's not a card I have in my main deck, right? It's something that I can only get because it's a duplicate champ spell, right? And now he has a Shyvana, which is slightly too late now because now it's turn 6 and I drew a Captain Erica, right? So I'm able to sort of just dispose of the Shyvana, and then I slam Galio, right? And then the game's kind of done. So it was very important that he didn't have it like on turn 4 where he could have applied a lot more pressure to me, but I think he wanted to greed out for the extra stats onto the Shyvana, which maybe was correct, maybe wasn't, but it definitely ended up working out for me here. I take the damage. There's no reason to block because I know I'm setting up my Galio. I want to keep 2/2 around to get 5 extra health towards my Galio level up, make my opponent's life more difficult. And I have the Captain Erica here. He goes for a sort of interesting play. He goes for a Hush here. just to pop the spell shield, and then I think he follows up with a strike spell, right? Or something like that. I think it's like a strafing or something. Yep. So I have a few options here, right? I have the flash freeze, I have the elixir, and I have the troll chant. Great. I actually should have used elixir first over the troll chant. The reason why I don't use flash freeze is because I think flash freeze is a lot more useful as a card, right? There could be a scenario where something like Troll Chant or Elixir of Iron doesn't actually stop a strike spell. And so I need to prioritize using the cards that actually work now versus the card that always works, right? Being Flash Freeze. I should have started with the Elixir of Iron here, because if it ended up working out, I would have saved myself a mana. But it is what it is. And it's up to my opponent to respond. Because I had both Troll Chant and Elixir of Iron, I think I beat anything and everything. Like I beat Double Hush, I beat you know, Targonian Telstones into, I guess he wouldn't have mana to play Blessing of Targon, but he does have the Hush, and then I have the Elixir of Iron to protect, which is nice. So this goes off. I capture the Shyvana levels, but what's actually really cute, and you'll see this later on in the game, is that captured units get their buffs reset. So the buff that he got from killing the Dragon Chow with the Ruined Dragon Guard actually is sort of just neglected. It's sort of just neutralized. Galio comes down, buffs up my board, and Galio is threatening to level, right? Which is really scary, because if Galio levels, all of a sudden my opponent has a much harder time attacking into me, right? Because if he attacks into level Galio, then I get a rally, and then I get a clap back, which is something that is super scary, especially because I have this Ash, right? It's kind of funny how Ash I sort of wrote off as sort of just a whatever card is actually paying pretty solid dividends here. I do tap out of everything, right? I have a lot of spells at 3 mana that would save a unit, but I'm the Galio. Like, if I didn't play Galio this turn and wanted to bank 3 mana for a flash freeze, I just wasn't doing anything, right? And that's just not worth it. Now, I don't have to attack this turn, because if I do attack, then, well, my Galio doesn't level, or there's a chance that my Galio doesn't level. And I do need to prioritize my Galio's level up. But he does something really interesting here that I don't know if I agree with. He ends up committing 2 more strike spells to kill my Captain Erica, which I think would have been okay if it didn't mean that he traded 2 units and 2 spells for it. Like, the amount of resources that he's sunk into this Captain Erica is just a little bit unfortunate, having to try to deal with it. You notice how the Shyvana that comes down, it used to be a 5, or you would have been a 6/7, is now a 4/5, right? Because of how capture works, and because he did prevent my Galio level up, because he killed my Captain Erica. Now I'm happy to attack into him, right? Beforehand, I probably wouldn't have attacked if my Galio was leveling, but now that my Galio isn't leveling, I'm free to attack, which is kind of funny how that works. And kind of, well, not funny for my opponent, but it is what it is. And now I have 2 champion strengths. I can level my Galio, and then I can really likely push lethal for next turn, right? Because I get to swing, I get to rally, I get a rally again with champion strength, and it's kind of over at that point. And notice that up to this point, this flash freeze has been sitting in my hand, waiting for the right moment. And as you guys saw, once he committed that attack, I think that moment is very likely to be now. He goes for a sharp side buff. I go for the Shield of Durand. And then just waiting patiently for him to commit the strike spell. For him to be sad, big sad at the outcome. Yep, he commits the strafing strike, and it's met with the flash freeze, and it negates everything. My units stay alive. My units are healthy. I have the Galio level up, and I think it kind of spells disaster for my opponent. So very, very quick 2-0 this week, but definitely into into decks that I was expecting, and pretty much hard targeting. So expected outcome, and I'm happy that I was able to actually close it out this week. But I'll end it there. Thanks guys for watching.